Season 5 delivered on many fronts and redeemed the show in the eyes of many people. But for other people, Rayllum specifically actually came with a few issues that sort of hindered their enjoyment of their relationship as a whole. Today, I would like to focus on those moments while discussing what happened with Rayllum in Season 5. And I would like to do my best to help explain why Season 5 Rayllum is actually amazing, and why it is in fact going in the best direction possible. I would like to begin by focusing on the issues that people had with them this season, and I found two major ones. Rayla's dishonesty with Callum, and Callum's unconditional trust for Rayla, despite her dishonesty being revealed, and his lack of self-respect. The first scene they share together is Rayla hiding the cursed coins from him, an act that does make sense at the time, but fast forwarding just a little bit into the episode, Rayla begins to want answers on the coins. To do this, she decides that she needs to sneak into Callum's office and go down into the sealed dark magic chambers beneath the castle, where Renan was kept prisoner by Lord Viren. Her hope was that if she found out how Renan was put into the cursed coins, she could potentially find a way to get him and her family out of them. So, she finds her way into his office, and after confirming that he isn't there, she's about to remove the nails that sealed the dark chamber before Callum walks in. Rayla quickly turns awkward and begins lying to cover up the fact that she was going down there. Callum believes her, and after looking at the painting, they leave together. It is here that Rayla sees the key that Callum uses to lock his office. After giving Callum some advice about the first elves to help with his studies, she purposefully bumps into him as he runs by.
I'll try it.
Whoa, bumps-a-daisy.
While to Callum, this of course looked accidental. Rayla actually did it on purpose so that Stella could grab his key. She sneaks back into his office and into the secret catacombs. While she's down there, she ends up finding Renan's bow, but not much else in the form of answers. She leaves, only to find herself under arrest once she exits the tunnel. Once Callum finds out, he storms into the throne room. This is the scene where Callum's own self-respect is called into question. Apelli provides evidence against Rayla, bringing up breaking in, to which Callum says she can go in there whenever she wants, but then she brings up his key being stolen. Callum is shocked, but he quickly dismisses it.
She's not the elf. She's Rayla.
Then, when it is revealed that she had Renan's bow, a look of horror crosses his face, but once again, he pushes that aside and claims that none of that matters. Despite her stealing his key and obviously sneaking into the catacombs, Callum tells Apelli that if Rayla didn't tell him what was going on, she had a good reason not to.
The tides are true, as the ocean is deep.
What does that mean, Prince Callum?
It means I trust her, unconditionally.
We can see the pure appreciation on Rayla's face in this scene, along with Callum's endearing smile when she reveals that she already broke free from her cuffs. But this scene left some people, myself included, a bit uneasy. Trust is one thing, but unconditional trust when you know she isn't being honest with you and keeping things secret from you is another. Lots of people claim that this scene and the next one shows how he's completely given up his own self-respect and has fallen back to just being her emotional support. In said next scene, Rayla tries to tell him what was truly happening, but Callum told her that he meant what he said and that she didn't need to justify anything to him, that she can tell him when she's ready. This scene shows that unconditional trust playing out. Rayla is genuinely appreciative of it, but despite that, many people interpret this as Callum pushing his own self-respect aside and allowing Rayla to continue hiding things from him. So, are these people right? Has Callum put his own self-respect aside for Rayla's sake? No. He hasn't. Lots of people watched this scene, but then completely missed the very next thing he says.
You can tell me when you're ready.
Thank you, Callum.
But hopefully soon. I mean, I am curious. But boundaries? Trust?
Trust.
This is his own self-respect speaking. He of course still wants to know what's going on with her, and he wants to know why she did the things she did that day. This not only shows that he in fact did not lose his self-respect, but he's actually showcasing quite a large amount of it. He's telling her that he expects to know what happens someday, but he also understands that it might be hard for her at the moment. He knows her pretty well, and he knows that she can be quite reserved when it comes to certain things. But he still does want to be told, eventually, when she's ready. Boundaries and trust are a part of many relationships, and the writers even stated in the Q&A that this was something the two of them will be working on together, learning what to say to one another and what to keep secret. While that might convince you about Callum's self-respect a little bit, the other issue is still at play here: Rayla's dishonesty. She stole from him for her own gain, her own endeavors. So, I will now try to defend Rayla's actions as well. Many people have used the word malicious or devious to describe Rayla's actions to Callum in this episode, but they really aren't at all. They're simply Rayla's own personal issue, something that Callum recognizes immediately. What Rayla is dealing with is probably one of the more personal issues a person can possibly have. The burden of her parents and Renan being trapped, and her not knowing how to do anything about it. This is an issue that she believes she has to deal with alone, and for good reason too. Why? Well, let's take a trip back in time. In order for us to truly understand the past and current issues with Rayllum, and what makes their interactions in this season so damn good, we need to understand what actually happened to both of them growing up, and what happened to them during the events of Through the Moon, because there are many interpretations that lead to bias for one character or injustice for another. Let's begin with Rayla's past, because there's a major theme in her past that the majority of the community completely misses or straight up ignores when they throw their blame and insults Rayla's way. Although I myself am not a huge fan of what she did to him, leaving him for 2 years to hunt Viren, I do still like trying to figure out why characters act in the way they do, because it is usually very revealing. Rayla's case is no exception. Looking back on Rayla's past, we see something quite interesting. We see why Rayla did what she did. We see why she felt the need to leave Callum behind. Rayla grew up in a culture that heavily supported the belief that the way to protect the ones you love is by going out to fight for them so that they don't have to, leaving without them to keep them safe from danger. Right off the bat, we see Rayla's parents leaving her behind in the Silver Grove with Renan and Athari to become members of the Dragon Guard, leaving to protect the Silver Grove so that nobody else has to. At this time, it's interesting to note that Rayla actually shares similar beliefs to Callum and Amaya, that she would never leave anyone behind. However, the actions of her parents are justified by Ruthari, and are even mentioned throughout the graphic novel Blood Moon Huntress, as Renan tells Rayla that he does what he does as an assassin to protect those he loves. He fights so that those he loves don't have to. While Rayla was a kid, she was opposed to this belief, but after living with Renan and Athari for many years and eventually training under Renan, that cultural belief rubbed off on her as well, to the point where Rayla saw it as the thing to do to protect someone she loves, to keep them out of harm's way. Unfortunately for Rayla, Callum did not grow up learning the exact same thing as her. In fact, he learned quite the opposite. Callum grew up being taught that the best way to protect someone you love was to be there for them, in their darkest times, in their toughest battles, and their lowest points. Companionship and loyalty. Similarly to how Rayla's family set the stage and showcased their cultural belief, Callum's family also did the same for him. When Callum was young, Harrow and a group of soldiers, along with Viren, were to ride off to Zadia to slay a magma titan. Its heart was invaluable to them in order to use its magic to provide enough food for the winter, and they would face cascades of famine and starvation without it. This is where the two cultures differ. Sarai, Callum's mother, was completely against the idea to slay the titan, but nonetheless, she accompanied Harrow anyway because she loved him.
I think this was in our marriage vows, right? Something about keeping you alive when you're acting like a brave idiot?
Unfortunately, this mission caused Sarai's death, but the story of her bravery and sacrifice taught Callum what true love to him really was. We see him on numerous occasions put himself in harm's way to protect those he cares about. He has even asked to be killed in order to protect his loved ones, should Erebos possess him again. This is what Callum learned, so imagine how he felt when the person he loved more than anyone else in the world left him behind. On top of feeling heartbroken, he must have also felt completely helpless. He lost any and all ability to accompany her, to be by her side, and to put himself in harm's way for her. To love her the way he was taught. So when you look at their situation like this, their issue is actually not a matter of who is at fault at all. Who is at fault is almost entirely irrelevant. Instead, it is a matter of cultural differences. Cultural differences that Callum and Rayla unfortunately didn't learn to respect or understand. Callum didn't grow up in the Silver Grove. He doesn't understand why Rayla left him. Likewise, Rayla didn't grow up in Katalis. She doesn't understand why Callum is so upset with her. As a viewer with this knowledge, how could we expect Rayla to act any differently? Her actions were purely out of love, and she was acting in the way she was taught to act. As a viewer with this knowledge, how could we expect Callum to react to her return in Season 4 any differently than he did? He didn't see it as an act of love. He saw it as her leaving him behind, abandoning him to chase after a shadow. How could he see her leave as an act of love when he was taught that love meant companionship and loyalty? How could Rayla possibly know that this is how Callum felt? Both of them have different beliefs, different values, and different ways to express their love. It's a very complicated situation. Throughout early season 5, we see Rayllum acting in a way that reminds us of how they used to be. Friendly, compromising, and a little bit flirty. But to each action, there is still a level of awkwardness behind it, an undertone if you will. Their issues still haven't been touched upon yet, and they both know it. Luckily, this situation does get touched upon about halfway through the season, and funnily enough, it is brought to light by the very sister of the person Callum learned so much from, Aunt Amaya. During the time in the Great Bookery, Amaya takes some time to speak to Rayla privately. Well, Gren is there, but you know what I mean. First, she apologizes for their first encounter at the Banter Lodge, which Rayla graciously accepts and tells her it's no bother. Water under the bridge, if you will. But then, after her apology, Amaya threatens Rayla. She tells her that if she ever hurt Callum again, Amaya would kill her. Rayla responds saying that hurting Callum was the last thing she wanted, but what's interesting here is that she instantly knows exactly what Amaya is talking about. This shows that Rayla is very much aware of the fact that her leaving hurt him, even though she doesn't quite understand why yet. In fact, we see her say this to him in season 4.
Callum, I know my leaving hurt you.
Maybe.
When Amaya tells Rayla that she abandoned him and broke his heart, Rayla's cultural belief comes out, stating that she couldn't bear to put him in danger and that she had to be strong alone. Amaya relates to this, and she begins telling Rayla about Sarai. She mentioned how she felt weak without her after she died, and that she learned, like Rayla, to be strong, stoic, and lonely. Rayla admits that this did feel like her sometimes. Amaya then goes on to explain how over the 2-year gap, she met Janai and fell in love. This change in her life also taught her a very important lesson. She was stronger when in the presence of her loved ones, stronger together. She goes on to tell Rayla that love and trust form a type of strength that is much bigger than an individual possesses. Or in other words, combined strength is stronger than independent strength. She then says something that changes Rayla's outlook on her relationship with Callum forever.
To have that kind of strength, it's not enough to love someone. You have to trust them to share the burdens you carry.
This is a huge step for Rayla's character growth. Amaya's discussion with Rayla gives her insight into what true love truly means beyond her own culture, what it means for Amaya and Janai, what it meant for Harrow and Sarai, and how Callum hoped it would mean for himself and Rayla. Rayla takes this to heart, and throughout the rest of the season, she and Callum actively fight together and conquer fears together rather than apart, with Rayla even overcoming her trauma response to water enough to help them defeat Claudia in the season finale. She fully embraced Callum's help after years of feeling the need to just simply protect him. She realized he could protect her as well. And this happens very, very quickly. In the very next scene they share together, Rayla finally tells Callum the truth about the coins. This scene not only shows how Rayla took Amaya's advice to heart, it also shows an insane level of maturity that we haven't really seen from Rayla yet. And let me explain. One of the issues that people have with Rayla this season is that they think she is returning to her old ways, the way she was before with Callum. In the graphic novel Through the Moon, Rayla is almost constantly forcing her burdens on Callum about her family and what happened to them. She even claims that Callum wouldn't understand her position, even though he also lost nearly everyone he cared about as well. This strained their relationship to the point of a massive argument between them. And here she is again, seemingly once again thrusting the burden of her family onto Callum's poor and innocent shoulders. Except, there is a key difference here that makes this moment much different than the events of Through the Moon. Rayla asks Callum for consent before she does this.
I know that I trust you to help me carry this. If you're okay with that.
To me, this shows an insane level of maturity on Rayla's part. It's not reserved, deceitful, or calculating. It's just Rayla making sure that Callum is okay with helping her share the burden, just like Amaya said. She remembers what happened to them last time when she didn't ask for consent. Callum tells her that although a lot had changed between them, not everything had changed.
I would do anything for you.
Remember this line for later, because it gets tested on numerous occasions. Rayla also shows an immense amount of maturity, patience, and self-control by forcing herself to focus on the current mission at hand, rather than the agonizing thought of her loved ones all being trapped in coins. She tells Callum this directly. All in all, Rayla has gotten way more emotionally mature over the last 2 years, and it's honestly somewhat shocking that so many people miss this change in her. By the way, all opinions are valid, but I do think people tend to focus on her actions and claim them as malicious or devious when they truly are anything but, clouded by their dislike of what she has done in the past. It is, abundantly clear that Rayla has changed and matured a great deal, and it is also abundantly clear that Callum recognizes this fact. Later in the same episode, Callum and Rayla are suddenly faced with dozens of corrupted banthers, and it truly looks like the end of the line. Callum reaches for her hand and gently caresses it with his thumb, telling her that he was wrong, that he waited too long. He then tries to tell her that he loved her, but she told him that she knew.
I waited too long. I hope you know.
I know.
These shots here don't even need dialogue to convey the message, just as them reconfessing their love for one another. However, there is an issue that some people have with this scene as well. People also interpret this moment as Callum putting the blame on himself for not accepting Rayla back into his life sooner, and worse, they believe that this is the writer's way of telling us that Callum was actually in the wrong. But it is not the writers telling us that Callum is to blame at all. Instead, Callum here is expressing the fact that he wished things had been different between them after she returned. He loves her, and it is evident throughout the season that he is genuinely happy to have her back in his life. But it took him quite a while to process that fact. Him saying he waited too long isn't the writers telling us that Callum was in the wrong for not accepting her back so soon, but rather him expressing that he wished he had accepted her back into his life sooner. That he feels regretful for his anger towards her in Season 4, even if it was justified, which is 100% in his character. That is who Callum is. When Rayla first came back, his love for her conflicted with his own self-respect, causing anger and a great amount of confusion. But during the hug at the end of Season 4, he told her that he was glad to have her back. That confusion that plagued Season 4 dissipated and was replaced by that long-lost affection from Season 3 and Through the Moon. One thing I would also like to mention is the actual fight itself within that bookery, as it showcases Amaya's point first, front, and present. Callum and Rayla literally combine their abilities together on multiple occasions, such as here, where Callum stuns the Banther with a ball of electricity so that Rayla could finish the beast off with her blades, and again, where Callum combines his magic with her bow and arrow to save Amaya. Once they miraculously escape that bookery, Rayllum has changed drastically. The underlying awkwardness went away almost completely now that Rayla has shared her burden and they confess their love. While not technically together yet, Aaron's words, not mine, we still see them share many wholesome moments over the next 3 episodes. For example, Callum helping Rayla follow Akiyu by jumping into the water while holding her hand, helping her cope with her trauma response. The theme of being stronger together. Rayla never would have done this on her own, but with Callum's help, she did. Rayla is also constantly reminded this season just how powerful Callum had become over the 2-year gap. In one scene, he literally steals the wind from Finnegrin's sails. Rayla caught him as he fell and held him, and this shot, along with her tone, shows us just how impressed and amazed she is with him.
He took their wind away.
This ultimately could change her opinion on if Callum truly even needs to be protected by her in the way that she thinks. It's becoming more and more clear to her that Callum isn't weak. He's actually very, very strong. But it's time to shift gears here. We need to talk about the infamous Episode 8, Finnegrin's Wake. This is the episode that puts Callum's love for Rayla to the test on multiple occasions, such as this moment where Finnegrin tortures Rayla. She cries out in pain, and Callum immediately rushes to her aid and cups her face. Finnegrin mocks her while she's suffering, and this causes something in Callum to snap. He becomes enraged and punches Finnegrin right in the face, which is a lot of people's favorite moment. This shows us just how much he loves her and is willing to put himself in harm's way to protect her. But the next moment is the real test, as Callum is forced to use dark magic to save Rayla's life. This obviously is a huge deal, as it's the first time Callum has used dark magic since his first time ever doing so back in Season 2. He said he would do anything for her back in the bookery, and this scene proves just how truthful he was being while saying those words. He did dark magic for her. What makes this moment even stronger is he knows just how much Rayla hates dark magic. Dark magic is what took her family from her, and just mere minutes before he uses it again, Rayla begs him not to.
Don't do it, Callum! Not again!
The topic of Callum's choice to use dark magic will undoubtedly come back to haunt him in the future, and it may perhaps lead to something I will mention in a minute or two. Once Finnegrin is defeated, Rayla comforts him, but Callum, in a surprise move, does not tell her about the use of dark magic. The guilt is etched upon his face even deeper than his wound. The guilt of doing dark magic, and the guilt of not telling Rayla about it. This is a very interesting moment, because what has happened here is actually a very substantial flip in their dynamic. For the first half of Season 5, Rayla felt the need to keep the coin secret from him, but now we see that Callum has a few secrets of his own that he isn't ready to tell her about. Not yet. Moving on to the finale, they continue showing us the theme that Callum and Rayla are stronger together rather than apart, with one scene in particular showing it in full force. Similar to the Akio scene, Callum tries to help Rayla cope with her trauma response to water. Callum places a hand on her shoulder and points towards his eyes, trying to help her focus on him rather than the water. But sadly, it didn't work and she had to return to the surface. Some people have misinterpreted this scene as Callum's spell not working on her, but it actually isn't that at all. His spell did work, as later proven by the fact that she does eventually come back to help. So, what this scene is truly showing is Rayla's water phobia, making it nearly impossible for her to even attempt to breathe. She developed this phobia after nearly drowning in Blood Moon Huntress. Callum's actions here are actually super endearing with this context. Given the fact that Rayla can actually swim, it is likely that Rayla's phobia comes from suffocation or drowning rather than the actual substance of water itself. So, imagine her struggle when she is being told to literally try to breathe while underwater. Callum knew this, and this scene is him trying to comfort her, to ease her trauma response by making her meet his eyes and focusing on him rather than the water around them. To be honest, I would have loved for this scene to have been a bit different. I would have loved to see Rayla try to breathe first, but then panic. Then, Callum reaches for her and gets her to look at him, and for her to successfully take a breath due to his help. While we didn't get that, the fact that we still see them try is a very nice moment. And of course, I can't go on without mentioning this scene. Just a perfect way to wrap up the Rayllum moments in Season 5. The way they look at each other is just amazing. Throughout this season, we saw countless moments that hint at Rayllum's rekindling, and while on the surface you may be tempted to claim that they're perhaps backpedaling or going in the wrong direction with them by having Rayla stealing from Callum and Callum's apparent lack of self-respect, after digging just a little bit into each of their characters, it really isn't that simple at all. Rayllum remains extremely compelling and complex. They were written to feel like real people with real struggles and inner demons. Real secrets with culturally driven actions. That is why Rayllum is actually amazing in Season 5, and amazing in general. Rayllum's complexity is honestly awe-inspiring sometimes.
You can't stop us.
Nobody can.
So we're going to Luxoria, right?
Too right we are.
There is so much substance, so much hidden behind that veil, so to speak. But I can't finish this video without discussing an issue that did not get solved in this season, but will probably get resolved in the next. The mutual understanding. Every relationship, romantic or not, needs two things to become long-lasting and healthy. Trust and understanding. This season did a very good job at developing Rayla's understanding of Callum's affection, if you will, through her talk with the Maya. But Callum, on the other hand, has not yet had the opportunity to truly hear Rayla's side. He may have forgiven her already, and that's fine. There was a lot going on in this season after all, and we still have 2 more seasons to focus on this. But despite Callum's unconditional trust and forgiveness, he still hasn't truly understood why Rayla actually left him yet. The reason I bring this up is because of a certain tweet from Aaron Eaz. In a recent Twitter Q&A, when asked if we will see an apology from Rayla to Callum, he responded with yes, perhaps more than once. This pretty much all but confirms that the discussion of these events that happened in their past will be brought up again, and perhaps it will be more of a one-to-one conversation rather than having Amaya explain it to her, or perhaps Callum hears something from Ithari, who could empathize with Callum after his own experience losing Renan. Ithari is in a very similar situation to Callum, by the way. Ithari always would stay home while Renan went out on dangerous missions, praying that he would come back alive. But that's the thing. Ithari is used to this because it's his culture. Perhaps once both Callum and Rayla have heard each other's side and culture explained by someone else, they then sit down for a good proper chat. Now, throughout this video, I have justified Rayla's actions and perhaps gave the impression that I don't personally believe she has to apologize. So, what could Aaron mean by her apologizing to Callum? If it's truly a matter of culture, what apology would she have to give? Rayla should apologize to Callum for leaving, but I don't think she has to. But what she does have to apologize to Callum for is lying. One thing I purposefully left out in my discussion of their past is the fact that Rayla lied to him about her mission in Through the Moon. On the eve of her departure to hunt for Viren, she and Callum had discussed the mission together. During this time, Rayla was adamant that she went alone, not wanting to put Callum in danger after seeing nightmares of Viren hurting him. But Callum eventually convinced her to let him accompany her, and the word together is used once again. She told him that he could come with her to his delight. But that night, well, we all know what she did. Rayla had absolutely no intentions of bringing Callum with her, and this, to me, is what she needs to apologize for. No matter what your culture taught you, a lie is a lie, and this was no white lie, Lujane. Perhaps Erin's tweet of Rayla apologizing will be about this, rather than her actual departure itself. She can still apologize to Callum for leaving as well, and maybe that's what Erin means by apologizing more than once, but that's a dangerous apology to make, I think, because if you apologize for something your own culture taught you, that could have some interesting implications that probably shouldn't be discussed on YouTube. One more thing as well, which actually gives the writers a reason to show all of this on screen in the first place, is the Moon Arcanum. Callum recently learned Ocean, as we know, but many fans and friends of mine are sort of confused on why he would target Ocean and not Moon, when he was already pretty much 95% of the way to Moon. Well, here's my explanation of this. I won't justify the Ocean Arcanum because you know. But when Callum first learned the Sky Arcanum, he encountered Sarai in his dream, who told him that to know something truly and deeply, you have to understand it. To learn an Arcanum is to understand an Arcanum. But while Callum may have been a lot closer to Moon than to Ocean over the 2-year gap, there was one thing he was missing: Rayla. While she was gone, Callum was quite possibly mentally blocked from understanding the Moon Arcanum completely, because he didn't, and still doesn't, understand the Moonshadow culture all that well. Rayla's culture. I believe that Callum understanding Rayla in a talk, either from herself or Athari, could also result in Callum finally understanding the Moon Arcanum as well. This is, of course, a theory, but I think it's a pretty damn good one, alright? Anyway, that's all I have to say for this video. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, hit that like button, and if you want to support me, join my Discord server and become a Patreon. Becoming a Patreon gives you a ton of extra rewards, like having your name being displayed at the end of videos, access to exclusive content, and a rank on my Discord server. If you'd like to support me, that's probably the best way to do it. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.